of our taxes and funds from the state and other sources until February or so. So it takes us a couple months to close out 16 and as far as collecting the taxes and so forth. So that's the reason those numbers are significantly lower at this point than what's budgeted. We still have some time there to collect money and to spend money. I mean, some of the departments are still spending money, and those bills won't be received until January, February as well. So we'll do tonight. We'll do an amended 2016, but that'll be based on our projection, and then in another 2 to 3 months we'll do a final amended when we have all the revenues and so forth. But in looking at the bottom, we're looking for a 1.54% increase in the budget from 2016 to 2017. As you go down through the different departments, you can look at the different areas where there are proposed changes, and I can just highlight a couple of them. You may have questions on some. We can ask, but looking like at the district court number, the big change there is because of the way we do indigent defense now, all of those costs have been switched to the county manager's budget. Previously, the indigent defense funds all came from the attorney's office, and we have switched that now, so that comes through the county manager's office. There's a reason for that, because they're the prosecution side of that, and there's some concerns nationwide on how indigent defense is being handled, and so we want to have those distances between them. So I'm handling those contracts, and as I presented to you earlier in the meeting, we had an indigent defense contract we needed to look at. We'll have on probably the next meeting, we'll have the yearly contracts for indigent defense come forward. I've got those bids coming in as well. So that's a big one. We've got central purchasing up about 12%. That can vary up and down depending on certain things we're buying and our insurance costs. The clerk auditor's office at 23%. The council has requested an additional employee, potentially the comptroller, that would be placed in that department, and that reflects that additional cost into Brent's department. Going down to engineering, which is a big one. In about 2008 or 9, our revenue for engineering essentially went to zero as the building shut down, and our county engineer Paul Wilson retired, and we took the 2 employees that we had. We had about $1 million budget for engineering at that time, and we transferred those employees into other areas of the county to try and utilize them, so we didn't have to let them go. And the engineering budget went to zero. And because I'm an engineer, I took that on at no cost, no additional cost, and because there really was no engineering to do at the time. We went several years. We're now getting quite a bit of engineering coming into the county. We do have a contract review engineer that we basically, the applicant or the permit applicant would pay for the contract engineer to do the reviews. We've been doing that, but we've also been handling some of the other engineering issues. It's time to get an engineer. This engineer is worn out doing the other job. And so we're putting money back into the budget. There is an equivalent offset on the revenue side to cover this. All of the engineering costs are fee-based, and so any of the costs incurred will be paid for by fees, not by property taxes. So that's a big one. Let's see, we got grants is down. We don't really have, it wasn't a lot there, and we don't have any in the works right now. Elections is down because we don't have an election scheduled for next year. That one goes up and down. Court security has some changes in how we staff that with the sheriff, so that some of those costs have been shifted into other areas. It's not necessarily a reduction in court security by any means, but it's a shift of some of those costs and responsibilities in the budget. Emergency management's a big one. That's a department we created last year, and so now we're going to fund the department. So that's the reason there's a big cost there, is we're basically setting it up for a full-time. We've had a part-time position previous to that. Now it's just turned into a full-time position, and so we've created that. This indigent fund, that's for indigent burials. The county does have the responsibility. By statute, we have to take care of any indigent burials and cremations. That's down a little bit, so I reduced that amount down a little bit. I think those are the big issues, so I'll kind of leave it at that and go to the questions, because the questions may be more specific to what I could offer to explain.
Okay, Council, do you have any questions?
This is similar to the preliminary that we could look at.
It's similar. We did make some adjustments. Barry and I worked on quite a bit, and we did make a few adjustments that is very similar.
Very minor from what I can see.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of change.
Any other questions from the Council? You're looking to hire a full-time engineer this year or next year?
Well, I think what we're going to look at is probably hiring by contract, a review engineer. So that would be more, depending on what type of contract we get, it'll be more revenue related. And so if there's a lot more engineering, there'll be a higher cost. If there's less engineering, there'll be a lower cost. So this is something there.
Probably so on a set fee, it'll be based on the need.
Yeah, it probably will not be an in-house employee. That will be something I'll bring to you. We're basically, if this is approved, what we'll do, first year we'll go out and try and find out what we can do out there to do that.
Any other questions from Council?
Do you believe that there's a need for a grant officer to start pursuing grant?
There's certainly opportunity in some areas to do that. Currently, Jeremy is doing quite a bit with grants and learning to do more. There are a lot of grants out there. You have to be a little bit careful with that, because I have seen in instances, not necessarily here, where a position like that creates more grants than you want. And what I mean by that is grants usually have an opposing contribution, or not opposing, but an additional contribution, a match. And the return of investment of what you put in to get those grants versus what you get back, there's some balance that has to be attained there. I'm pretty comfortable currently with what we're working with on trying to obtain grants, that we're doing a pretty good job, at least on the emergency management and law enforcement side. We're getting quite a few in there. If there's some you're specifically...
What I'm seeing is, like, out in economic development, Rachel tries to get grants. And when we do something at the library, then someone at the library tries to get grants. And he's working on grants. And law enforcement's working on grants. And so everybody's developing this expertise kind of individually. And if there was some central office that's what I've done in government before. We've had a grant officer that kind of keeps everything on track, kind of a project manager for all those people going after grants, and really it increases the revenue that you get.
Now that may be something to look at. It's not something we really...
How does that work where, I understand what you're saying, where each of those grants is kind of specialized to that particular entity or department? How does that grant officer get all of that?
Well, the grant officer is usually an expert on obtaining grants and writing grants, and there's a peculiar and particular process for doing that. And then a small portion of each of those grants then funds that office. So you're not really, you have to budget for it, of course, but then you're regaining that revenue in successful grant applications.
But the grants don't generally pay directly for that individual. You may get additional money, but you still have to fund the grant, right?
Right, that's what I said. You have to fund it up front. Up front you have to fund it, and then you recover it later.
But you can generally take a portion of the grant as administration.
Yeah, there would be a PI or a co-PI on the grant. So it's something I brought up before, but I've never really brought it up in that matter, it's something for us to start looking at.
I think it's worthwhile to look at. I don't know enough about it to really say it's good or bad, or something I'm not real versed in.
Any other questions? If not, we will open this up to the public for public hearing. Any questions or comments on the proposed budget as it's been presented?
Thank you. My name's Mike Kozakowski. I live on the Jordan L. I know all of you gentlemen remember me 2.5 years ago at the middle school and the speech I gave there, and I recognize several of you in the audience. And certainly Mike and Greg, because I sat next to him, snickering comments, and I apologize for it now. But the concern I had at that time, and I was dragged out of retirement to deal with the issue of all the litigation and lawyer expenses that we were incurring. And the reason why I believe that I was dragged out of retirement by several people across the county, because in my former life, I spent 33 years doing, well, the last 2 dozen years doing enforcement in a $4 billion revolving cleanup fund. And it was my job to do two things: to get the money back that we spent from responsible parties, and to encourage responsible parties to go clean it up themselves. And how you do that is you do enforcement actions. You do studies, you hire attorneys. So I had quite a large budget, bigger than yours, to do nothing but enforcement. So I'm acutely sensitive to litigation costs, because we were accused of putting a lot of the children of these attorneys through Ivy League schools and paying for luxury cars. And that was an unacceptable way to go. So I have a couple questions here on our litigation expenses, and I'm glad, Scott, you're in the room this time. You missed my spiel the last time, and I was a little bit more hyped up. But there are several examples, but let me just ask you 2 examples on the cost of hiring attorneys, outsourcing attorneys. And please don't feel offended, but I have to ask this directly. How much did you spend, and I have developed the skill, we all did in the business, of being able to read documents upside down. So when I met with 2 of the councilmen, there was an upside down document there that was from a Salt Lake law firm that they were looking at, or at least held that was relevant to something that I was working on. How much did we spend on that law firm to investigate the issues that Kit and I raised about the J-Spot? Just how much are we spending for that? If I'm wrong, I apologize. You hired, or somebody hired, a law firm outside. Is that correct? That wasn't the one. Okay. Well, then I can't read upside down. Okay, so I'll get to one that I do have the documentation of. How much did you spend, or how much were we billed to support the federal litigation on the Ute Indian tribe appeals for that Salt Lake firm? And I do know that's the Salt Lake firm. How much money did we spend? Or how much were we billed? Because as we found out in all of the SSD litigation, what we billed and what we actually paid were 2 different things, because we couldn't afford paying it. But how much did we spend? Because you did hire an outside firm.
We actually sent that to our insurance carrier, and they hired the outside firm.
Okay, how much did the insurance co pay for that firm?
I would have to look, but it's getting close to $100,000.
Okay. Now, we didn't do too well in the federal courts, did we? Or the Supreme Court, either the circuit court. And I could comment all night, but I won't.
Are you going to get to where this relates to the current budget?
Yes.
Okay.
That line up there that has expenses.
Okay.
Okay, and I would just like to find out how much we're spending for out-of-house counsel at the current time. very happy that the SSDs are resolving the lawsuits.
Which line?
Well, that's up there on attorney. Must be about the 10th or 12th line down.
It's a 0.
Well, wait a minute. So you're saying they have zero extra bureau
There's
budget?
0 money in his budget for outside.
Okay, I'm
Zero.
glad to hear that. Thank you.
It's been 0 for
As long as I...
16 years. As long as I've been the manager.
Keep
I
up
can't
the good-
speak to it before that.
Keep up the good work.
Okay, any other questions from the public? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing on this item. And council, it's back to you.
Chair, I'll make a motion that we, again, continue the public input section of this, a written comment if they have such, and take it up on 6 o'clock on the 21st and then regular meeting.
I'm wondering, well, okay, we got a motion and a second, a question on it. Mike, could we, or do we need to, Mr. Mike Davis, the amendments to the 16 budget?
That's next.
Well, no, it's on this same item.
Right, but I haven't given it to you yet.
Okay, oh, so it's
Right
just that, that's right, we're splitting hands. It's one agenda item, but,
Yeah.
okay, so this is on, so, okay, good.
I do want to add one thing, because there was a question asked earlier in the meeting, not at this portion, that will reflect on the proposed cost of living increase.
That's item 4.
It is item 4, but I just wanted to mention that I did propose a 2.5% increase to all county employees, and that is reflected in those numbers there. So when that question comes up on number 4, that is already in these numbers.
What line item is the council pay increase? Because everything else is going to be clerk's office or you or...
All elected or separate, right?
The council budget, which is the second line,
Okay,
that total budget has their wage as well as anything that comes out of the council department in it. My department would have my wage, my secretary's wage.
so then the council is a $30,000 increase?
No. If you go online and look at the budget that was posted there in November, you can go into the detail of each department. So then you look up the detail of department number 4111, and it will show what the wages component is, what all the other components of that $247,929 budget is.
Okay, thank
Part of
you.
that increase, as Mike explained, in some of the categories, we moved things around, where last year they might have been in one budget category, now they're in another one. Some of that is, that increase you see there is reflected. We moved an area into there that in prior years wasn't there. So that's where part of that increase came from.
Okay.
Not just in salary.
Yeah, I don't know, their wage is what, $12,000 a year? So 2.5% of that is per person.
About 6,000 total. From 16 to 50.
The 2.5%.
The 2.5% is about 6,000.
I'm sorry, I just.
No, that's fine, appreciate that. Any other questions from the, oh, no, we'll close it. So we have a motion to continue the action on the 2017 budget to December 21st at 6 o'clock, and we have a second. A vote on that motion, Councilman McPhee.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the next item that's in the same list is to look at the amendments